According to the law as it exists today, it is possible to transfer a real estate right without consideration, i.e. transfer as a gift from an individual to a relative, and enjoy an exemption from praise tax. In the case of purchase tax when transferring without consideration, the recipient of the transfer should pay only 1/3 of the purchase tax he would have been required to pay if he had purchased the property according to Israeli law. The apartment in money, in accordance with the fixed and known steps of purchase tax at the time of transfer of rights. The transfer of a real estate property as a gift to a relative is sometimes used as a tax haven, and in order to prevent tricks and tax exercises intended for the transfer of apartments without consideration in order to sell them later exempt from praise tax, as part of the law, defining a clause in transfer without consideration. In the case where the ownership of the apartment being sold is shared by spouses, the period specified for the age of this older son will be taken into account. In this matter, a receipt of at least 50% of the price of the apartment as a gift in the 3 years before its purchase will be considered as a receipt, transfer as a gift. In fact, there is no meaning to the question of whether the apartment was transferred without consideration or whether at least 50% of the funds with which it was purchased were transferred as a gift. In both situations, the apartment will be considered as an apartment transferred as a gift. A relative for the purposes of praise tax can be a parent, spouse, offspring, parents of a parent, sibling and their spouses, descendants of a spouse and the spouses of each of these. In the case of a corporation praise tax, the brother of the spouse is not considered a relative, and so is a nephew who is the son of the brother. For the purposes of purchase tax, a relative is a spouse, including the person who was the spouse for the 6 months preceding the sale transaction, a descendant, parent, brother and sister, and the spouse of a descendant. A gift from a grandfather to a grandson or grandson to a grandfather will also be exempt from praise tax. Free transfer between spouses. The sale of an apartment without consideration from an individual to the spouse who lives with him in the apartment will be completely exempt from paying praise tax and purchase tax. If the couple does not live in the same apartment together, they will have to pay 1/3 of the normal purchase tax. In accordance with this ruling, a publicly known person will also be considered a spouse, and the consideration will not be dissolved at all in praise and purchase tax. In order to enjoy an exemption from purchase tax and praise tax when transferring without consideration, it is required to file and present a divorce agreement that has been validated by the court of a judgment.
When should you make a free transfer to a relative, a spouse? A free transfer to a spouse or other relative may provide a significant discount or full exemption from paying tax to the gift giver, the transfer of the apartment in several situations. Anyone who owns a single apartment and is interested in buying another apartment according to a calculation of reduced purchase tax in accordance with the tax brackets of a single apartment. According to the Israel law, the owner of an apartment who purchases another apartment will be required to pay purchase tax at a rate of 5% or more, depending on the additional apartment tax brackets and not according to the tax brackets of a single apartment. To save a payment of 5% purchase tax when purchasing an additional apartment, the buyer will be able to purchase another apartment by calculating a reduced purchase tax according to the tax brackets of a single apartment, if he transfers to the relative the apartment he owns without consideration. Transferring an apartment without consideration to a spouse, the ideal exemption. Free transfer between spouses is considered particularly lucrative, which gives both parties to the transaction an ideal exemption, and this is because they both enjoy a full exemption from paying the tax, both praise tax and purchase tax. It is important to note that the exemption will only apply in cases where both spouses live in the same apartment in question in the transfer transaction. In the case of an additional apartment where the spouses do not live permanently, the spouses will have to pay purchase tax at the rate of 1/3 of ordinary purchase tax.
The transfer of the apartment without consideration can take place at 2 points in time. Transferring an apartment without consideration before purchasing another apartment may be a wise and lucrative step that will allow you to enjoy benefits, discounts, and even a full exemption from purchase tax calculated according to the tax brackets of a single apartment in 2 time points. Transfer without consideration to a spouse after purchasing another apartment. After purchasing the additional apartment, the transferor will be entitled to and will be able to enjoy purchase tax calculated according to the levels of a single apartment if he undertakes to transfer or sell the apartment when reporting the additional apartment. The first is owned by him within the period of time prescribed by law, when today it is 24 months. After this period of time, he will have to transfer the apartment to a relative for no consideration or sell it according to his obligation. In the past, the period for the sale of the additional apartment was 18 months, and as of 7/7/2021, the period of time for the sale of the additional apartment is 24 months. Pursuant to Amendment 85, a temporary order was issued for 5 years, during which the period was reduced to 18 months. The validity of this order ended, and accordingly the period returned to 24 months as stipulated in Section 9. Anyone who owns 2 apartments and sells one of them to a third party will not be entitled to an exemption from praise tax at the time of sale, but to a better linear calculation at most. In order to be entitled to receive an exemption from appreciation tax on the sale of the apartment, he can transfer the additional apartment he owns to his relative, the spouse, free of charge, and immediately sell the remaining apartment with a full exemption from paying appreciation tax.
In conclusion, ensuring the correct order of operations and tax planning when transferring an apartment without consideration between spouses or relatives is of great importance for the purpose of exercising entitlement to receive an exemption or discount on the payment of tax. When it comes to gift deals, it is important to consult an expert and experienced lawyer who is knowledgeable and an expert in real estate law before making the deal. A transfer transaction without consideration between spouses or relatives, or a transfer of rights between spouses or family members in a residential apartment, constitutes a transaction in which rights in real estate, an apartment or property are transferred for free from one side to the other. This is a transaction without receiving payment, in part or in full by way of a gift. It should be noted and clarified that the definition of a transfer transaction without consideration between spouses is a transaction that is made between the parties without payment or transfer of any consideration from the transferor to the transferor. The definition of the term without consideration is the transfer of property or rights in real estate, not with money or benefits, and without receiving future consideration. The importance and benefits of obtaining legal assistance from a real estate attorney. Shimon Hahn is a lawyer and notary with rich knowledge and experience in the field of civil commercial law and real estate. The firm includes a team of leading and experienced lawyers and attorneys who will accompany and guide you on how to conduct various real estate transactions and transfer without consideration between spouses and relatives. Legal aid is essential and helpful in order to manage the transaction in a professional manner while safeguarding the interests that are important to you, and in order to ensure the full realization of your rights. Legal assistance includes providing a range of services including drafting an application for transfer and registration of real estate rights in the registry, dealing with various bureaucratic difficulties in the most effective way, proper tax planning, utilization of exemptions and discounts, and more. The legal advice provided by an expert real estate lawyer with the appropriate knowledge and experience is helpful, important, and provides many benefits because the lawyer who accompanies you is familiar with the procedures in the various bureaus and is well acquainted with the application process and working methods. Professional representation provided by an expert real estate lawyer who is experienced in real estate transactions in general, and in particular in transfer transactions without consideration, will protect the interests and rights that are important to you, shorten times, and save costs. We are at your service with any question, request, and we will be happy to provide you with a complete answer to every need until the transaction is completed in the smoothest and most successful way.